Welcome back to another installment of the Tangible Darkness podcast. This is our second episode, and I'm thrilled to have you here. In this episode, we'll delve deeper into the intimate details of my upbringing, including events that took place both at home and at school. Additionally, get ready for some spine-chilling paranormal experiences that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Although it's incredibly tempting to dive into the most profound encounters right now, I've decided to save them for a future episode dedicated entirely to my experience with the Ouija board. During that episode, I'll share the unsettling events that unfolded while I was using this mystical object. So find a comfortable spot, grab a drink, a snack, or both, and allow yourself to relax as you continue to get to know me on a more personal level. And of course, be prepared for more eerie and mysterious tales that will captivate your imagination. It is 1983 and the ranch has been sold, bringing about mixed emotions from my childhood. There were countless months spent in solitude without the company of other children. Leaving the ranch now opens up numerous possibilities for socializing and engaging in activities with kids my age. On the downside, I hold cherished memories of living there, not just terrifying ones. Among them is a distinct recollection that resembles a scene from a Norman Rockwell painting. I vividly remember running through the yard beneath a massive oak tree, chasing after lightning bugs at dusk on a summer evening, trying to capture as many as possible in a mason jar. I realize it may sound like a stereotypical depiction of Southern Americana, but it genuinely happened. I truly did those things. Frequently, I would venture out to explore the woods alongside my German Shepherd mixed dog. I would collect intriguing rocks and fossils, occasionally using the case that came with my binoculars as an improvised lunchbox. Life on the ranch also serves as a reminder that it was a challenging time for my parents to raise me during those years due to my unresolved issues. I was a peculiar child who always kept things to myself. I often describe myself as a combination of Wednesday Addams and Dennis the Menace because at an early age, I had a morbid side and curiosity and a mischievous nature. For instance, there was a time when I drew 2 gravestones with my aunt and uncle's names on them, believing it to be a thoughtful gesture. Proudly displaying my artwork to my Aunt Isabel, I told her, "I made this for you and Joe for when you pass away." I'm not certain of my exact age at the time, but I know I was under 10 years old when I did that. Now, as an adult, I chuckle at the memory and wonder what was going through her mind when I did that. Castroville, Texas, in 1983 definitely offered more than what I experienced in the past 6 years. But it also presented its own challenges for a growing child. With a population of less than 2,000 people, no movie theater, no shopping mall, and only a Dairy Queen as its sole commercial restaurant, there wasn't a whole lot to do aside from renting movies, going to the public swimming pool, or visiting a short-lived video game arcade. Thinking of playing hooky from school while living in Castroville? Good luck with that. The junior high school and high school were surrounded by cornfields. I remember my family from San Antonio teasing me and calling me one of the children of the corn, referring to the popular Stephen King novel. This major move brings about a refreshing new change for us as a family. For a while, things are good, but the abuse also continues, as do the behavioral issues at school. In many ways, I resemble most 12-year-old children, but there were certain aspects of my personality that didn't align with my age. One consistent trait, whether it was at school or in the presence of authority figures, was that I viewed adults as my equals, and in some cases, even inferior to me. Yes, it may sound surprising, but I attribute this mindset to an excessive amount of reading. Constantly absorbing new knowledge and educating myself about the world, its history, both its dark and glorious moments. My extensive reading influenced me profoundly and allowed me to see the world from a more enlightened and mature perspective. However, it also made me keenly aware of the flaws in human beings, particularly in adults, and I developed a strong disdain for them. It was the flaws I observed exclusively in adults that contributed to my perception of their inferiority. This is why going through puberty was a traumatizing experience for me. I felt myself becoming what I despised. After all, at that point in my life, nearly every adult, not just at home but also at school, had let me down and failed me. This is when the school system begins to work against us as a family, specifically me. They inform my aunt and uncle that I must see a psychologist or suffer permanent expulsion from school. Consequently, I start seeing a psychologist once a week, and I become one of the Ritalin kids of the 1980s. Eventually, my aunt refuses to send me to the psychologist or to keep me on medication, so the school assigns a psychologist to meet me during school hours. They arranged for a psychiatrist to have a one-on-one session with me in the principal's office, in addition to the psychologist. They administer a Rorschach test, the ink block test. Then they evaluate my performance in various school subjects to compare it with that of my peers. To their surprise, they discover I score well above average in every subject, except math, where I'm average compared to other students. At just 12 years old, I'm already reading at college freshman level. Now, in addition to all of these challenges, I was also struggling to maintain the friendships I had in previous years with my fellow students. We all know how things unfold in junior high and high school. People start forming groups and excluding others. Kids begin to notice differences in each other. As early as the age of 3, I was aware that I was different, and others started realizing it too. This led to some minor bullying at school. Although it pales in comparison to what kids endure nowadays, school life wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either. The ongoing issues at school and at home, combined with my aunt and uncle's excessive drinking habits at bars and social gatherings, became too much for their marriage to withstand. After 18 years together, they filed for divorce. Consequently, my aunt and I are compelled to move elsewhere and eventually settle in San Antonio, Texas in 1989 with her new boyfriend. I have a turbulent relationship with her boyfriend, and at the age of 16, I pack up all of my clothes and leave during the night. I spend 2 nights staying with my grandmother, but then I am taken in by my father's other sister, Yolanda, and her common-law husband. However, this arrangement doesn't last long, as he has never shown any care towards me. He would often remove my pictures from the wall alongside other family members, and my Aunt Yolanda would scold him and put my picture back up. Unsurprisingly, within a year, he manages to convince my aunt to abandon me at my mother's home. My mother, who has no genuine interest in being a mother to me, has only played the role out of obligation for years. Having been kicked out multiple times while living with my mother, I eventually find myself being invited to live with my best friend Richard, his brother, and his mother Josie. Josie is everything my mother is not. She warmly welcomes me into her home with open arms, giving me a big hug, and assures me that she will be my mother, while asserting that my biological mother is undeserving of me. It's love that I haven't felt since living with my Aunt Isabel. During my upbringing with my aunt, she always made it a point to express her love for me. It is now 1992, and in this new home is where my encounters with the paranormal resurface once again. Richard's mother shared a few instances with me, revealing an aura of mischief lurking in their home. According to Josie, strange occurrences took place over the years, such as items mysteriously disappearing and reappearing in odd locations. For instance, Josie once couldn't locate her shoes, which she habitually placed at the foot of her bed. Despite searching the entire house, the shoes were nowhere to be found, only to be discovered later inside the freezer when she went to cook dinner. Another incident involved Richard's father scolding Richard about the whereabouts of the broom. Richard insisted he didn't know, yet his father continued to blame him and yell, urging him to find it. It wasn't until much later, when Richard's father was installing a ceiling fan and cutting into sheetrock, that he found the broom tucked away in the attic. Josie had a fondness for perfume and had amassed quite a collection. Among them, there was one particular perfume bottle she adored. However, one day it inexplicably vanished despite her exhaustive search for it, never to be found again. Perhaps the most astonishing tale occurred when the family fell asleep in the living room over the weekend. Richard's father woke up to someone kicking his legs and witnessed a woman with long, dark, straight hair standing before him. Terrified, she vanished before his eyes. His screams woke up Richard's mother, and they both noticed the TV turning on. They saw the woman on the screen as if she were being broadcasted like a show. Initially distant, she gradually approached the screen until her entire face filled it. Richard's father screamed for Josie to turn off the TV, but before she could, the old-fashioned knob flew off and struck Richard's father, leaving him traumatized by the incident. At which point, Richard's mother disconnected the TV from the power. These incidents occurred before I moved in with them, but I did have a few eerie experiences of my own while living there. One night, as I leaned against the archway connecting the living room and dining room, watching Richard's brother Andrew play video games with his friend Reggie, I caught sight of a tall figure dressed in black walking past me and into the kitchen. Assuming it was Richard, who often wore all black and was over 6 feet tall, I thought nothing of it. However, as time passed, without anyone emerging for the kitchen, my curiosity got the better of me. Upon entering the dark and empty kitchen, which also led to a pitch-black garage, I hastily returned to the living room, spooked by the unnerving encounter I had witnessed. Richard and his brother Andrew frequently argued, as is common among siblings growing up. During one such disagreement, with Richard's mother cooking in the kitchen and me seated at the dining table, Richard and Andrew argued across the room from each other. After a few minutes, Andrew fell silent and went straight to his room. When it was time for dinner, they realized Andrew hadn't reappeared since the argument. Josie asked Richard to fetch his brother, and I could hear him and his brother talking in his room, but the details eluded me. Andrew eventually joined us at the dining table, visibly upset, and confessed that during the argument, he had spotted a black cloud hovering near the ceiling. It frightened him so profoundly that he sought refuge in his room, too terrified to come out. During my time there, Richard and I were invited to a house party where I was responsible for providing the music. As a music collector since I was 12, known for my vast vinyl record collection, I took pride in showcasing my music at parties. I meticulously recorded 2 hours worth of music onto a cassette tape, placing it on the dining room table to ensure its accessibility for the party the following day. However, recalling the perfume bottle incident that night, I grew concerned about having left the tape there due to its importance and the effort I had invested in making it. Unfortunately, my fears proved valid the next morning when the tape was nowhere to be found. Fuming with anger, I was convinced that this mischievous entity was to blame. I had no choice but to repeat the entire process, spending another 2 hours crafting the party music. That was the extent of my experiences during my brief stay there. Josie would have likely welcomed me to stay longer, but circumstances didn't allow for it. I had developed an infatuation with a guy I had met, and I ultimately moved in with him. Regrettably, it turned out to be a bad decision, as the relationship quickly became toxic and we parted on bitter terms. My life took a turn for the worse, leaving me with nowhere to go. Consumed by shame for leaving Josie's home, I couldn't bring myself to ask if I could return, and I didn't see Josie again for 23 years. Throughout the years, Josie remained in my thoughts, but I hesitated to contact her. I feared I might have hurt her or that she would reject me. Moreover, personal changes I was undergoing at the time made me apprehensive about whether she would accept me. Thankfully, when we reconnected, she embraced and welcomed me with the same love she had shown when we first met. We are now as close, if not closer than ever before, particularly since she lost her son Richard during the COVID epidemic. Richard was one of my dearest friends, and not a day passes without me reminiscing about the wonderful times and adventures we shared over the years. In the following 2 years, I would constantly change residences until finally finding a place that was offering stability. The year was now 1994, and my 21st birthday loomed on the horizon. During that time, one of my close friends decided to acquire a Ouija board. It wasn't a particularly unique board. In fact, it was a recently manufactured one that could surprisingly be found at a mainstream store like Toys R Us. The fact that such an item was available in a children's toy store was quite astonishing. But why not, after all? It was just a game, or so we believed. Little did I know that this seemingly innocuous event would lead to my most profound encounter with the supernatural. It was my first connection with something that would linger in the shadows for years to come. Its presence made itself known to me in 1994, then again in 1996, and once more 15 years later when I attempted to rid myself of the board. During my endeavor to rid myself of the game board, a remarkable encounter takes place. I meet someone who not only validates one of my earliest childhood experiences, but does so in a way that seems utterly unbelievable. The chances of this meeting occurring were incredibly slim, leaving me astounded. As events unfold, they take on a peculiar pattern that could easily be dismissed as mere coincidences. However, as time goes on, the occurrences multiply to such an extent that it becomes impossible to attribute them all to chance. The accumulation of these incidents reaches a point where the notion of coincidence no longer holds any credibility. I am thrilled to finally reveal my most profound encounter yet, which involves a combination of the Ouija board, a local psychic, a local DJ, a childhood memory, and yet another sighting of a UFO. In this podcast, we will also delve into the topic of dreams. Like many individuals, my dreams can be strange, confusing, or even downright ridiculous. However, there are also dreams that are remarkably real, filled with terror, foretelling future events, providing information that could not be known by normal means, or serving as warnings from entities beyond our world. The dreams we will discuss do hold significance for this podcast because they align with the experiences shared by myself and others. So get ready to hear about the most unsettling encounter to date, which involves not only myself, but also other individuals. I want to thank you for coming to listen to my second episode of this podcast. I also want to let you know that we will now be accepting emails from you, the listeners. These can be comments, these can be suggestions or requests to discuss certain topics. But keep in mind that this will be an ongoing podcast, not just showcasing all of my experiences, but also discussing various matters such as ghosts, demons. What are they? Where do they come from? What do they want? I have my own ideas of what they are. My take on these subjects may be a little outside the box, maybe sound crazy to some, but make perfect sense to me. But yes, I encourage you all to send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. And our email is like the name of the podcast. It is thetangibledarkness@gmail.com. And I will provide a link in the platforms that allow for me to place a link. Otherwise, it is thetangibledarkness.com. I'm glad I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you look forward to hearing more.